While Michael Collins is hearing eerie sounds coming over the radio, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are having their own encounter on the moon's surface. But they aren't hearing things, they're seeing them. NASA may have lost the tapes, but we still have transcripts of radio communications. There are hours and hours of conversations between the astronauts, ground control, even the President of the United States. But here's something strange. 2 minutes of radio communications are missing. But we do have the transcripts of those minutes. And the transcripts explain why the audio is missing. The astronauts definitely saw something on the moon.
No, this is not enough to go over. No one's gonna believe this. Whistle. I say that there were other spaceships. They're lined up on the other side of the crater. There they are, and they're watching us.
Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong planted an American flag on the surface of the moon. The entire world watched them do it. But they left something else, something that we didn't see. Within a few feet of the first boot print made on the moon lies a small white cloth pouch. Inside that bag is a gold olive branch, a symbol of peace. Also in the bag is a disc.
Ooh, I hope they left a copy of Journey live in Houston.
They didn't.
Oh, that's too bad. The escape tour was where I met my second wife.
Do you mind if
my first wife paid for the tickets.
The disc...
The little orange fish who grew up with a crazy wish. He took a midnight bowl going anywhere. What? You didn't see that coming?
Unfortunately, I did. The disc was made of silicon and about the size of a $50 coin. Etched onto the disc are letters so small you can only read them under a microscope. The disc had messages of goodwill from NASA and 73 world leaders. Now, why bring messages of peace to an empty world? Because the Apollo 11 crew was warned that when they landed on the moon, they wouldn't be alone. Back in 1965, the crew of Gemini 4 experienced the first recorded UFO sighting in space. It's in the radio transcript from astronaut James McDivitt.
I just saw something else up here with me, but just as I was getting close enough to it to take a good picture, the sun got in the way and I lost it. It had big arms sticking out of it, it looked like. I only had it for just a minute.
After that sighting, NASA astronauts created code words for UFOs, like bogey, Santa Claus, and fire. When Apollo 8 went into lunar orbit in 1968, the crew saw a Santa Claus. We have Jim Lovell's report to Houston.
Houston, Apollo 8, over. Hello, Apollo 8. Loud clear. Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus. That's affirmative. You're the best one to know.
Is there something on the moon that NASA doesn't want us to know? The answer, of course, is yes. Do we know what they're hiding? Well, thanks to a few whistleblowers, that answer is also yes. It was 1965 when Airman Second Class Carl Wolf was summoned to NASA's Lunar Orbiter Project facility. He was in a hangar surrounded by scientists, but what struck him was these scientists weren't just from NASA or just from America, they were from all over the world.
And the first thing I thought to myself, if this is NASA, what are all these foreigners doing here? What are all these people from other countries speaking other language? Didn't make any sense to me.
And they looked concerned.
You know, what are all of these people doing here? And they were very quiet, very reserved, and there was a very peculiar pall hanging over them. They had a very concerned demeanor.
Carl was just a technician. He was there to fix a piece of equipment that processed images from the lunar satellites. So he went into the dark room where the imaging equipment was. Now, while waiting for clearance to move the equipment to a better workspace, another airman working there shows Carl something life-changing.
About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers.
So Carl finishes the job and goes home. He was excited to learn more about these moon bases on the evening news. That news report would never happen. Then Carl realized there was a cover-up, and he was part of it. So he blew the whistle and started doing interviews. During a national press conference in 2001, he said he was willing to go before Congress under oath.
And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
He never got to testify.
Oh no, here we go. Please say he's alive and well and didn't die in a mysterious unsolved case with no suspects.
Well,
He died in a mysterious unsolved case with no suspects, didn't he?
while on a bike ride near his home, Carl Wolf was hit by a truck and killed.
Son of a bitch.
But Carl wasn't alone. Dr. Ken Johnston also knew NASA was lying. From 1969 to 1972, Johnston worked with NASA as an aerospace engineer at their Lunar Receiving Laboratory. If something came back from the moon, he helped catalog it, including photos taken by the Apollo astronauts. And what he saw was stunning. There were photos of alien cities and ancient machinery. There were ruins, domed buildings, stone towers, and objects that seemed to defy gravity. A supervisor asked him to destroy all the photos of the moon's surface. Johnston did, but he secretly held on to one set of pictures. After he came forward in 1995, Dr. Johnston was dismissed and never worked for NASA again. Donna Hare is another former NASA employee with secret clearance.
I was talking to one of the techs in there, and he drew my attention to a photograph, a NASA photograph. It had a dot on it, and I said, "What is that?" Well, he drew my attention to it, and I said, "Is that a dot on the emulsion?" And he's smiling, and he has his hands crossed, and he said, "Round dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground."
She said that NASA scrubbed UFO and alien anomalies from their photos, sanitized for our safety.
And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, "What are you going to do with this piece of information?" And he said, "We always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public."
Robert Dean was a U.S. Army major who worked for NATO. In 1964, he saw a report called The Assessment. This report covered an alleged 1961 UFO incident with dead aliens. Dean claimed that NASA destroyed 40 rolls of film from the Apollo missions. Some of the saved pictures are of cigar-shaped objects seen by Neil Armstrong. There's a picture of a disc the astronauts saw as they orbited the moon. There are also pictures of huge buildings in the Landsberg crater.
The astronauts in orbit above the moon were particularly fascinated by the Landsberg crater. There was construction going on. There were gigantic facilities in the crater up there, so they were specifically delegated and assigned to photograph Landsberg to see if they could figure out what the hell was going on down there. While they were looking at Landsberg, this object happened to express interest in them and flew by.
These were the pictures of objects that appeared outside the astronauts' windows. Time and again, mysteries of the far side of the moon were discovered and documented. Time and again, they were suppressed. Time and again, brave witnesses have come forward to expose this suppression. Time and again, many of those witnesses died before they could testify. NASA says we should trust them, but not whistleblowers. But how can we trust NASA when we know for a fact that they alter images? I did a whole episode on how NASA photoshopped pictures of Mars and the Earth, and some of their editing was pretty sloppy.
NASA Mars cover-up link down the alley, Sally.
In 1994, the Clementine orbiter took 2 million pictures of the moon's surface. When they were released to the public, people started noticing that many of them had sections that were blurred out. Here's an image of the Zeeman crater. Clearly, something is being censored. When other images of the crater were overlapped, compressed, and compared, it became obvious that something was there. This became known as the Zeeman object. Some people think this object is a giant spacecraft as large as a city. It's thought to be a ship because another picture of the Zeeman crater has been censored and shows a different object. When compared, overlapped, and enhanced, there appears to be another large ship. Now don't bother looking for the censored images on NASA's website. They're gone. Other anomalies have been spotted like giant footprints. Scientists have tried to explain them away as meteor impacts, but that's probably not what they are.
These structures that we see stretching over tens of kilometers across the lunar surface do not appear to be related to impact cratering processes.
Pyramids have been found on the moon's surface, obelisks and mile-high towers. As recently as 2021, China's moon rover took a picture of what's been called a mystery hut. NASA has explanations for all of these. They're tricks of the light, or pareidolia, where your mind sees an object in randomness, like a cloud shaped like an animal. Now, of course, we could know for sure if we would actually visit these structures, but there doesn't seem to be an appetite for that. Before the lunar missions, both the US and Russia planned to establish military bases on the moon. The original plan for the moon was not exploration, but weaponization. The US called its plan Project Horizon. And let me know if you want to see a full episode about this. It's pretty intense. So in the 1950s, getting to the moon was a major priority.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Ignition sequence start.
In the 1960s, both the United States and the Soviet Union scrambled to get a man on the moon.
0, all engine running.
It is for these reasons that I regard the decision last year to shift our efforts in space from low to high gear as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency.
The US got there first.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The Soviet program was set back by a few failures, but they kept trying. Apollo 17 was the last manned mission to the moon. That was December 1972. Although more missions were planned, the United States canceled them. In 1972, the Soviet lunar program was no longer a priority. And in 1974, the Soviet Union officially canceled its program. Now, if I were a conspiracy theorist, I would think that both the US and the Russian government, despite being enemies, agreed to stay away from the moon. In 1972, the only way those two countries would agree on anything was if they were forced to. The USSR and the US were the only superpowers on Earth, but there was another bigger superpower, and this one was on the moon. Astronauts of the Apollo missions hearing and seeing things, bases on the far side of the moon, whistleblowers uncovering proof. This story is full of wild claims, but let's break it down. The transcript of Apollo 11 seeing spaceships on the moon is unofficial, meaning probably fake. someone supposedly captured the recording with an amateur ham radio and transcribed it. The Apollo 10 sounds were real. All 3 astronauts heard something when they went to the far side of the moon, but NASA says it was just interference between 2 different radios. But astronaut Al Worden doesn't buy that theory.
The Apollo 10 crew is very used to the kind of noise that they should be hearing. Logic tells me that if there was something recorded on there, then there was something there.
Well, I don't know what the hell that was, babe.
The Apollo 10 astronauts never publicly discussed the sounds. Apollo 8 said they saw Santa Claus because they were in space on Christmas Eve. It was just a joke.
Morning, Apollo 8. Peak here. I'd just like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas on behalf of everyone in the control center, and I'm sure everyone around the world. None of us ever expect to have a better Christmas present than this one. Hope you get a good night's sleep from here on and enjoy your Christmas dinner tomorrow, and look forward to seeing you in Hawaii on the 28th.
Okay, leader, we'll see you there. That was a very, very nice ride, that last one. This engine is as smooth as glass.
Yeah, we gathered that. An outstanding job all the way around.
Now, the gold olive branch that Apollo 11 left on the moon is also real, as is the silicon disc with messages of goodwill. Buzz Aldrin almost forgot to place it, and Neil Armstrong had to remind him.
Oh, if he forgot it, they could have done another take. Kubrick was famous for doing lots of takes in his movies.
This episode is not about the Stanley Kubrick conspiracy.
Stanley Kubrick moon landing video below.
Thanks for that.
Neil, Buzz, everybody back to 1. Camera rolls, sound speeding, and action with the flag thing.
Okay, we get it. As for the whistleblowers, well, as most whistleblowers do, they receive a lot of scrutiny. Critics say people like Ken Johnston and Donna Hare never worked as closely with NASA as they claim. Johnston only worked for companies contracted with NASA, and after he made his claims about stolen photos, he never worked at NASA again. Also, his story has changed a bit over the years. A lot of Johnston's moon photos have been debunked. Well, in my opinion, not fully debunked, but there are valid challenges to his photos. In the description, I link to the book Dark Mission by Richard Hoagland and Mike Barra. Dark Mission shows a lot of these photos. It's worth checking out, and you can make up your own mind. There you go, Barra. You got a plug. You happy? I'm teasing. To be fully transparent, Mike contributes to this channel. He's one of the people who got me interested in the moon. But I'm being honest when I say I read Dark Mission when it first came out, and Richard Hoagland was one of my favorite guests that Art Bell would have on Coast to Coast. So the book is fun, and the link is below. Now, back to the whistleblowers. Donna Hare was also a contract worker. Her clearance was relatively low, and she made that clear. But the only proof we have of her story is what she says.
And I was just amazed that they had a protocol in place for getting rid of UFO pictures.
The same is true for Carl Wolf. He was very much who he said he was, but the only evidence we have of what Carl saw is what Carl said he saw.
We walked over to one side of the lab and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose?
The whistleblower stories are compelling. To me, Carl Wolf sounds sincere, but without hard evidence, there's no way to know for sure. Now, I'm glad whistleblowers come forward, but always be skeptical of them. Some of them are telling the truth, and some are just spreading and censored.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, if I'm not on a list by now, I'm about to be.
No, they're watching you, human.
Yeah, I really don't want to talk about this. Honestly, I'm about to put everything that I have at risk.
You're actually scaring me right now.
I'm scared too. Here we go.
Like the steam engine which sparked the Industrial Revolution of the late 1700s, the internet is changing everything it touches. And at the cutting edge of the revolution is Wall Street.
So we are now 6 3/4 points above fair value.
The early 1990s was the beginning of the tech boom. Internet startups were getting millions in investments.
Now 2002. Bemis is looking 39 and about 35,000 if you want to buy 10 grand.
And they had access to vast resources and vast amounts of data, personal data. The intelligence community wanted to gather this data to create a digital fingerprint of everyone using the internet. If they could identify bad actors, criminals, terrorists, whatever, they would compare that fingerprint against others. They called this the birds of a feather approach. If Joe's a bad guy and Bob's a bad guy, and they both go to certain websites, then other people visiting those same websites were potential bad guys, so let's track them.
So, surveillance?
Yes.
Of Americans?
Yes.
Legal?
No. Well, officially illegal as of 2010, but the law was murky in the 1990s. And for the intelligence community, murky means opportunity. Still, the intelligence agencies didn't have the ability to manage all this data, but they knew people were out there working on it, and they were all looking for funding. But if you're the NSA or CIA or DARPA, you can't drop by an internet startup and ask them to build you an illegal digital surveillance program.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad look.
It is, but it also gives away the game. Surveillance is only valuable if the target doesn't know they're being watched. So this technology would need to be funded privately and quietly. So in 1994, the Highlands Forum was founded. Ever hear of the Highlands Forum? You probably haven't, and they like it that way. The Highlands Forum, or Highlands Group, was formed as a think tank, a bridge between technology companies and the Pentagon. The Highlands Forum is an invitation-only group of government officials, academics, and executives from tech and defense companies. Their discussions are private and off the record, operating under the Chatham House rule, meaning members can disclose information from the meetings as long as it doesn't harm anybody, but they can never reveal who said it, not ever. Although hardly anyone knows about the Highlands Forum, the group is highly influential on U.S. defense policy, especially regarding technology. And they're a private organization. No auditing, no oversight, no Freedom of Information Act requirements. They're a black box, the perfect conduit for transactions you want to keep off the books. So, tech is booming, data is flowing, and we've got our think tank to connect us with the people capturing the data. Now we need the money to fund them. That same year, the Massive Digital Data Systems, or MDDS program, was launched. MDDS would fund scientists, researchers, and companies who worked with big data sets. The Highlands Forum would help identify, facilitate, and coordinate these transactions. To keep these transactions private and secret, the MDDS moved money through unclassified mainstream agencies like the National Science Foundation. Computer scientists were getting millions in grants from the NSF, totally normal. They didn't know who was really behind the money. And MDDS was highly compartmentalized. It had tons of projects and departments. Nobody knew what anyone else was doing or who was even in charge. And this was by design. But the overall program was managed by the CIA, NSA, and DARPA. So, we've got black budget money flowing through the NSF. And we've got our private organization, the Highlands Forum, looking for opportunities. So the word goes out to researchers in academia. If you can handle big data, we'll give you big money. Then a promising project emerged. 2 Stanford graduate students working on a search engine made a breakthrough. In the early 90s, searching the internet was difficult. Popular engines like Alta Vista and Lycos produced hit or miss results. Searching hiking gear would show pages mentioning hiking or gear, often irrelevant blog posts or articles. Users had to scroll through pages of useless results. It took forever, and I remember it well. 2 Stanford students developed a system that changed everything. Their automated web crawling system identified a web page's context, not just the text. Then, pages were ranked based on relevance to specific queries. Pages actually discussing hiking gear would rank higher for that query. High traffic pages and pages with lots of incoming links ranked even higher. These were signals to the algorithm that a page was a good match for that query. Using this search engine felt like magic. Usually the first or second result was exactly what you were looking for. Somehow it knew. The system used an optimization technique called association rule mining, or query flocks. This assumes birds of a feather stick together, meaning people searching specific keywords tended to click the same result. Query flocks worked with people too. The search engine learned that people with similar online habits search for similar things. If you searched hiking gear, the system assumed you liked outdoor activities and were probably within a certain age group. And the more you used the search engine, the more it learned about you. So your searches always gave you relevant results. Using information you willingly provided, these students had developed a method to create your digital fingerprint. Jackpot. The CIA, NSA, and DARPA learned about this project, and through the National Science Foundation, the NDDS funded it. If you haven't guessed by now, those two students were Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and the search engine was Google. You won't find MDDS in Google's origin story, but this is public, unclassified information. It's just hard to find. In Brin and Page's famous 1998 research paper, The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine, they thanked DARPA for their support. You can see this for yourself. It's on page 16, section 7, under Acknowledgements. Now, there's a lot more to this rabbit hole. The connection between intelligence agencies and technology companies is so—
Hang on.
What?
Pop quiz.
Go ahead.
How do you make your living?
YouTube.
And who owns YouTube?
Google.
Right. Bye-bye, channel. Now would be a good time to ask for Patreon support.
I don't do plugs until the end of the episode.
Make an exception. We're in the deep water now.
He might be right. Truly and honestly. I won't know until it's too late. But telling you this story might have been a terrible mistake. So yes, please go to Patreon.